to the Ontario Caregiver Organization's webinar series. These webinars bring together caregivers and subject matter experts to explore topics of interest to caregivers. We do this to support and engage chosen family, friends, neighbors, really anyone who's caring for someone else. My name is Katie Muirhead, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the lands that we're on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land we each call home. I'm joining you today from the city of St. Catharines in the Niagara region, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendships of Indigenous peoples. If you'd like to learn more about the lands you're joining from, you can find out more at native-land.ca. Our webinar today is called Managing Caregiver Anger and Frustration, Strategies for Support and Advocacy. Anger and frustration are two emotions often experienced while caregiving. In today's webinar, we'll explore the topic of anger and frustration in caregiving and offer practical tools for managing these feelings effectively before they reach their point of exhaustion and burnout. And Melina Ladouceur is joining us today to share more on this topic. Melina is a registered social worker who spent most of her career working in the areas of oncology, anxiety management, and grief and bereavement. After 10 years of working as a cancer coach at the Ottawa Cancer Foundation and another 5 years working at Bereaved Families of Ottawa, she now works as a therapist in private practice where she provides counseling to people facing cancer, to caregivers, to those grieving the death of a loved one, and individuals seeking support around anxiety management. Melina also facilitates various oncology support groups and trainings with like-minded organizations. So welcome, Melina. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today and to talk more about this really important topic. Being a caregiver is hard, and anger, frustration, these are things that you might be experiencing, whether it be from time to time or on a daily basis. And I want to start off by saying, Katie's mentioned a bit of my background that I've worked a lot in oncology, but I want you to know that this presentation is meant for all caregivers. It doesn't matter if you are caregiving for an adult or for a child. It doesn't matter if they are coping with illness, whether that be a physical illness or a degenerative disease or Alzheimer, dementia, mental illness. Being a caregiver in anger and frustration impacts everyone. When you are a caregiver, it doesn't matter who you're caring for. These are hard emotions. So, yeah, what we'll be covering today, we'll be talking about a lot of different things. So to give you kind of a quick overview, I won't spend too much time on this slide, is we will be talking about caregiving and mental health, the impact of being a caregiver on mental health, and we'll be, more specifically going into the topic of anger and frustration. Where does it come from? Why am I feeling angry? What contributes to this? Our goal here is really to help you feel validated in your experience and to help you in better understanding anger and frustration that comes with caregiving and the different things that can contribute to that. We'll be talking about advocacy and, there'll be some information about as you're navigating the healthcare system, whether that's physical health, mental health, support services for a child with special needs or for a parent with Alzheimer or dementia, it's not easy to navigate these systems, and that can be one source of anger and frustration for caregivers. So I'll be giving, some tips on how can you channel anger in good ways and ways to advocate and support your loved one. We'll be really getting into the big bulk of today's session will be tools, right? So there's the social worker in me coming out, wanting to ensure that not only am I validating, giving you information on this important topic, but that my goal is that you walk away from this with a lot of strategies, tools, your toolbox being more equipped on, okay, what do I do with these feelings of anger and frustration? And how do I cope with that? So, yeah, lots of actionable strategies to come on navigating these challenges and helping you with your own well being. So let's jump right into the topic. And you're going to notice, throughout the presentation, I'll be, putting out some questions, keeping that chat going with conversation. But to start with, I think an important thing to highlight is that as a caregiver, you're an important part of your loved one's team, of the people that are there to support them and to help them in many different ways. And that can look different depending on who it is that you're caring for, who's your care recipient, right? If it's your parent, if they're coping with physical illness, you're helping to maybe ensure they take their medication, bring them to appointment, take notes. There's no shortage of roles that a caregiver can have. It can be going to appointments, navigating care, it can be emotional support, it can be um, help in many, many different ways, right? And the type of role you have is going to determine what those things are, right? So, a parent with a child with special needs, I mentioned that because myself, some of my caregiver experience comes in my own personal life, come from being a mom to a child with special needs. But that looks very different, if I'm working with a client and their loved one is coping with a brain injury. And so, the type of support, the type of services they're providing may look very different. Um, what we know is that being a family caregiver, so being a support person to your loved one, there's a lot of challenges for caregivers. So the Change Foundation is an organization that came out with a really interesting report on family caregiving in Ontario. And what they found is that there's a lack of it's hard to find support. It's hard to find counseling services. It's hard to coordinate care with. That's another challenge for caregivers is coordinating care within the healthcare system or mental health system and dealing with the financial hardships of external support services. So, having to pay for different services. This is why organizations like the Ontario Caregiver Organization is so important because it gives you a way to access a lot of wonderful supports and resources at no cost. Caregivers have a lot of information and support needs that are not often met. And again, this is where organizations like this come in and fill that gap, right? People have a lot of questions on caregiving and a lot of questions sometimes as they're navigating the healthcare system or mental health system on how things work, on understanding, the illness or the challenge that their loved one is coping with, that their care recipient is coping with. Many caregivers are at risk of burnout. And I'm going to put that in perspective a little bit more in this slide. So, 1 in 3 caregivers are in distress. So, are experiencing emotional distress. That can be high anxiety, that can be, having a lot of strong, finding themselves very sad, very burnt out, very overwhelmed, anger, frustration. But we know 1 in 3 caregivers are in distress. Caregivers take on a lot of roles and responsibilities. And you're trying to navigate caring for your loved one. You might be doing that in addition to full-time or part-time work. This is being there for your care recipient is probably not the only thing you have. Maybe you have young children. Maybe it's your child or it's your spouse going through something and you're caring for elderly parents. You might have financial stress. You might be in school. There's so many other things. People have complex lives, right? So you're probably trying to navigate caregiving and the new roles and responsibilities that might come with that, in addition to just trying to navigate your life and navigate bills and navigate all the different things that come in life. Caregivers can experience a wide range of emotions. And today we're really going to narrow in on anger and frustration, but do know that It is very common to experience, a sense of uncertainty, just like your loved one about what the future has in store. Will their symptoms get better if they're getting treatments? Will those treatments work? Not, will their health continue to decline? There's a lot of uncertainty. And that can bring all types of other feelings. You can have feelings of disbelief and denial that this can't be happening. Or if your loved one's situation is worsening, that's incredibly hard. Feelings of grief, fear and anxiety, anger, guilt, shame, feelings of helplessness, and more. Being a caregiver comes with a wide range of emotions that you're going to experience. And it's important to understand our feelings and be able to do something to help ourselves as a way of helping to avoid or minimize the chances of caregiver burnout. Caregiver burnout comes from having too much long-term stress, and 60% of caregivers show symptoms of burnout. So it's an important thing to talk about. Just a couple other very quick things that I'm going to touch on because I really want to jump into the heart of the topic today of anger and frustration. But other things is, it is normal to miss the way things used to be in your relationship with the care recipient before illness, before mental health difficulties started, before dementia started, before you realize your child had special needs. It's important to talk about grief, right? Like often we hear the word grief and we think of someone grieving the loss of someone who's died. And that is not what grief, that is one way that we talk about grief. But grief is missing how life used to be before you were a caregiver, right? And so you may be missing how things were before all this started. And it can be the little things that you miss, the little things in your routine that you used to have in the morning with your spouse, time you used to have. Maybe you're caring for a parent and they used to be the person you go to for advice. And now they're going through this. And you might not be able to turn to them as much for advice. The roles may be a little bit different, right? So what is anger? Let's really kind of narrow in here. Anger is one of the core human emotions. So just like happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, and surprise, which are core human emotions, anger is up there on that list. These feelings have, deep roots in their survival mechanisms that we developed through human history. So we've learned through histories and decades before us that these emotions, they come up and they're part of our survival. We need to get angry to be able to take certain actions sometimes. Anger is associated with the body's fight, flight, and freeze response, activated by the sympathetic nervous system. It helps individuals to confront challenges head on. And I'm going to just share for a moment. I have a slide. I'm going to be coming back to this a little bit more, but just so you're aware, we all have this fight, flight, freeze, fawn response when we're feeling emotions very intensely. And this can help us in different ways. It can help us to take action, but it can also make things hard. So I'm going to come to that in a few minutes, but I just wanted to share that with you. So when the problem is that when anger comes up a lot, which it can a lot with caregiving, and I'll get into some examples, and I'll kind of get you guys in the chat to share a little bit more on what makes you most angry. I'm sure those are things you have answers to. You may not know completely, but I'm sure there are some things going through your head on things that frustrate you in this process of caregiving. But let's talk about how when anger is triggered too often or too intensely, it can have an impact on our health, on our physical health, on our mental health. It's not fun to be coping with anger and frustration all the time. And it can strain our personal relationships too, because when we're angry, we may be quick to react rather than respond. Reaction's automatic. It's what we do when we don't take kind of a pause and reflect on how do I want to show up for myself right now with this emotion coming up. So you can think of reactions as we might yell, we might hit something or hit someone. We might find ourselves, talking to someone in a way that is a little more blunt than we would want to. We know that chronic exposure to stress hormones released during these episodes of anger can have an impact on us, right? On decision making, on memory, can weaken the body's immune defense. So we won't talk too much more about this, but it's more, we want to try to do things to help ourselves with our anger so that it doesn't start having really an impact on us, on our body. So, as I mentioned, all caregivers can experience anger. It doesn't matter who you're caring for, what they're coping with, if you're living with that person, if you're not, and it can be directed at different people. It can be directed at yourself, can be directed at your care recipient, family members around you, healthcare system. So it really ranges. So, an important thing to know about anger is that anger is a secondary emotion. So, we have our primary emotions, and anger is something that we experience. There's something underneath anger, and I'm going to share a visual that will help to make this a little bit more clear. So basically, as it mentions here, underneath anger is usually other feelings. And anger and frustrations are how we express those other feelings. So let's take a look at what I mean here. You may have seen a visual like this before. You might have seen something about an iceberg before that, like, we see certain things at the surface, but we don't see things underneath. And this is a great one to explain what's under anger. So as you can see here, we feel anger, but underneath that can be a lot more. For example, if you are feeling really fearful or anxious about your loved one, and your loved one, isn't, for example, sharing with their medical team the symptoms that they're experiencing, the side effects that they're experiencing of treatment or of the disease, if they're going to appointments, you're accompanying them, and they're not sharing that, you might get really angry with them. And the reason that you're getting angry, one of those reasons might be because you're really scared. You're really scared of, if they don't share these symptoms and side effects, what's going to happen if they're not honest and transparent with their medical team. You might be feeling really down about what's been happening and about the impact it's had on your relationship. Being a caregiver, you might really miss, let's say you're a caregiver to your spouse. You might be really missing the time that you guys had together as a couple, and now you're really operating in a caregiver and care recipient manner. Maybe there's less romance, maybe there's less time to focus on the dreams and the things that were important to both of you. So you might be feeling really angry, but behind that is probably sadness, right? Sadness of the impact that this has had on your lives, on your dreams, on what you guys were planning and where you were at in your life. So there's often things underneath it. And it's good to be aware and to reflect on what could be underneath this in order to help yourself. So I mentioned I would come back here. I'm going to take one moment here, and then we're going to go on to our next slide, and I'm going to throw out a question in the chat for everyone. So you're going to get a copy of these slides after. There's a lot of information that I include in here, and I spend some time on it, but some of the things you'll be able to read more. What I will mention here is you're going to see in these bubbles, you'll see inside, outside, beside, above. This is ways that people express anger. And in a flight response, which is the survival mechanism of, I want to run away, I want to get away from this, people might ruminate. So they might be in their head and really be thinking about it over and over. They might avoid conflicts, and by saying everything is okay, they might not ask for help. They might pretend to not have feelings or needs or wants and say, I'm fine, everything's fine. And that's kind of a running away response. A fighting response can be blaming and shaming others, yelling at others, bullying, saying mean things, aggression towards people, property, or pets, gossiping, being critical and judgmental. And then for freeze, you'll see difficulty with decision making, constantly being on the phone or gaming or other addictive behaviors, procrastination, low motivation, withdrawing, low energy. So when we are a caregiver and we're kind of in a freeze response, we might distract ourselves with other things and we might pull away from people. When we're angry. So if that's everyone's kind of got an automatic, you might be doing stuff from different categories, but everyone kind of has like a main one. And the fawn response, some people may not have heard. You might have heard of fight, flight. You might have heard of freeze, but a lot of people haven't heard of fawn. But fawn is basically where your automatic, when you feel these strong emotions, so in this case, anger, your automatic response is people pleasing, saying yes to people. So fixing, planning, problem solving, overdoing and overfunctioning, disconnecting from yourself and from your support system, abandoning your needs for others. So we all do different things when we're angry, and it's helpful to identify, what do I do? Because then you'll know the traps you might get into. So what I would like to do is I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a moment so I can see the chat, or actually I can see the chat while I'm sharing. I can still see it. I'm wondering if people might just want to share what makes you the most frustrated when it comes to caregiving? And I understand that this is a big question, but I'm just wondering if you can take a moment, maybe put in a couple words on, is it, you know, is it the healthcare system that makes you frustrated? Is it that your loved one, isn't opening up about how they're feeling? Is it that you're having trouble navigating things? Like, I'm going to encourage you to just share, and I'm pulling up the chat here. Yeah, I'm seeing some answers already. Thank you guys for sharing. So I'm hearing, yeah, lack of support from family, expecting people's expectations of you to do it all. Yes, changes in personality, the healthcare system. Got it. Yes, I'm hearing people in a nursing home not being familiar with the parents' condition. Um, yeah, long-term caregiving. Yeah, I'm hearing family, lack of support system, feeling alone, cultural differences, toxicity, changes in relationships, changing in living situation. Being an only child and having to do it all. Yes, got it. Yes, lifestyle changes, lack of relief, feelings of hopelessness. You guys are doing a great job at sharing this. Depression from a spouse. Yes. Limitations of functionality. Yeah, frustrations with family, not accepting new limitations of the care recipient. Got it. Having patience, never ending fighting with your child. Got it. Thank you guys for sharing this. Okay. Learning to provide care. Yeah. Role change. Yes. We're going to keep going in the presentation, but you guys are sharing so many important things. I'm glad that you're aware and that you're recognizing some of the things contributing to that anger. So, some of these things you've mentioned already, so I won't spend too much time on it, but these are just some of the situations where anger can show up in caregiving. I'm going to kind of go through this quick because, again, I really want to ensure that I focus most of the time on giving you things for your toolbox. So let's get there. But yes, so many things. Our expectations and beliefs can contribute to anger. For example, if you have a belief, or if your family or your care recipient has a belief that you should do it all, then that's going to make things very challenging. If your loved one isn't open, if your care recipient isn't open to having outside services come in and provide support, if your child isn't open to accommodations that are being given in school for their disability, that's going to be very frustrating. But yes, our expectations and our beliefs can contribute to anger. So a lot of people might have the belief of like, I need to do it all, or, I know what they need. And you might get upset with your loved one if you're trying to do it and they're not showing appreciation for it. And that I often suggest, to kind of give you guys some tools already in our presentation. I often encourage people one of the best and most powerful things that you can do is to ask your loved one, how can I help? What do you need from me? What things are most helpful that I do? Which things, might not be so much what you need. Because sometimes our expectations and beliefs of what the other person needs or wants can be very different. And sometimes the reason they may not be showing appreciation is because it might be maybe you're taking on something for them that they want to keep on. That's part of their independence, right? So, really good to kind of check in with yourself and check in with your family on expectations and beliefs and what might be things getting in the way. Feelings of injustice, feeling exhausted, overextended, not appreciated. Challenges with the healthcare system, with eligibility requirements, financial barriers. When your care recipient is not being honest with their medical team about symptoms, side effects, or if they're in denial about what's happening. When your care recipient is continuing with unhealthy habits and patterns that might impact the illness that they're coping with. Other situations when your care recipient is not accepting the supports, accommodations, or treatments being offered to them, when you're feeling scared, worried, sad while you're grieving, that again, if we think of that iceberg, that might be part of the anger is the secondary emotion, but you might be feeling something underneath. And so sometimes it's helping ourselves with if I'm feeling really scared and anxious, maybe I need to do something to help my anxiety, which is then going to help the anger. The same with if I'm feeling really sad, maybe I need to talk to someone and express the sadness that I'm holding on to. Sometimes we can get into thinking traps that bring up anger for us, and I'll quickly go through that as well. And when facing caregiver burnout, of course. So for the thinking traps, I'm going to share a little bit, but again, I really want to get to those strategies and ensure we have a good amount of time for that. So what I will say, and you'll be able to read this after, is that there are various thinking traps. And this comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. So helpful, though, so helpful. And cognitive behavioral therapy is a very helpful approach and to helping you cope with difficult emotions. And what's so helpful about this is if we can identify the thinking traps that we get into, we can see, oh, this isn't the truth. This is a trap that I'm falling into. And then we can learn what do I do to help myself with it. So I'll mention, some of them briefly. So overgeneralization is where we draw conclusions based on a single negative event or experience. So for example, last time we went to the hospital, my loved one had to be admitted. So we're going to the hospital. That means they're definitely going to get admitted. That's not true. We don't know that, but that is a thinking trap we can fall into. Catastrophizing, anticipating the worst possible outcome in a situation, imagining your worst case scenario. It's a thinking trap, right? And it can make feelings of anger worse and overwhelm and anxiety. Personalization, taking personal responsibilities for the things that are beyond your control. And so when you kind of, think it's my fault that they can't access counseling, for example, but maybe you've done a lot of work and maybe it's a lack of resources or not having found the right person to talk to. So many wonderful resources out there, and I definitely encourage you to reach out to the Ontario Caregiver Organization more to take part in their services because there's a lot out there that they offer and that they can connect you with. All or nothing thinking. So this is viewing situations in extremes, black or white, with no rooms of shades or shades in between. So it's like, this is going to be a horrible day, or this is going to be the best day ever, right? Or we're going to go to the doctor and we're going to get great news, everything's going to be perfect, or we're going to go and they're going to say that nothing has improved, right? Like there's a lot of shades of gray. Maybe you'll go and there'll be some improvements, right? And emotional reasoning. So assuming that because you feel a certain way, it must be true. So I encourage you to read up more on this and to figure out how it might be impacting you. So our expectations and beliefs can create anger and frustration for us. So I mentioned a little bit of this already. I'll let you take a look at these slides later. But basically, if you're telling yourself I should be able to juggle it all, that's going to make you overfunction. And then that is going to make you resentful. And then that's going to bring up anger and frustration. So our beliefs can really get in the way. I encourage you to reflect on your strengths and to look at everything you have on your plate. Are you taking too much? Can you delegate to someone else? Can you ask for help? Can you pay for services to come in so that you don't have to do as much? These are just some of the signs of caregiver burnout. So do be on the lookout for this. Again, 60% of caregivers experience caregiver burnout. So if you are noticing some of these signs in yourself, it's really good to talk to someone. It's good to reach out for support, connect with some counseling services in your community, talk to your family doctor. These are things to not be ignored because we want you to care for yourself. So let's get into some tools and strategies on what can you do. So there are so many things out there. So I'm going to give you kind of a snippet. This is my attempt in 15 minutes to give you some quick tools. So I'll be very brief on them. I do encourage you, you're going to get a copy of the slides, so you don't need to take frantic notes. And do know that if you have questions after the presentation, feel free to reach out to the Ontario Caregiver Organization. They can circle back to me for any additional questions. Yeah, so let's jump into some of these. So I think a first place to start is I often encourage people that it's good for you to acknowledge what you're feeling. Naming things, so noticing and naming your feelings has a lot of power. So just naming the fact that, like, I'm feeling angry right now, right? You don't have to name, you can name that to the person, if you're with someone and you're feeling that emotion come up in you, but you can also name it to for yourself, right? Like noticing, acknowledging, I'm feeling angry right now. It's good to then express it, to get it out in certain ways, whether that's writing in a journal or speaking openly about it with someone you care about, going to a support group, reaching out to a caregiver coach through the Ontario Caregiver Organization, having ways you need to get it out, right? Expressing it and getting it out means that it is not kept in here. When we keep emotions in here, they grow. They need to be expressed. So notice and name your feelings and notice what's underneath them. So that's where if we come back to that iceberg, look at that, when you get the slides, look at that visual a bit more and try to reflect on, I'm feeling angry about this. What emotions might I be experiencing because of that? I'm feeling really angry because my family expects me to take on all the responsibilities. Well, what are you feeling about that? You're probably, feeling like it's all on you. You're probably feeling really alone. So identify the feelings underneath it. And a good technique is to use the why technique. So very simple. The why technique is when you're like, I feel really mad, ask yourself the question why and see what comes up. I feel really mad because I feel like my family expects me to take on all the care for my care recipient. Okay, why? Because they've always been this way. Okay, why? And like go a bit further and see what comes up. When we go a bit deeper, we sometimes really touch on feelings that we hadn't realized were there. So I often encourage you to just keep asking why and see what comes up as you keep asking yourself that question. So take a mini break, go for a walk. Remember the 90-second pause. You're going to see on the right side of the screen, I have a visual here. A 90-second pause is the difference between a reaction and a response. This is such a powerful tool that I use a lot with clients. We have an event that happens. Someone says something to you. And in that moment, you feel angry. You notice the feeling come up in you. And the thing is, we're so automatic as human beings. You do the behavior that maybe you don't want to do. So maybe you say, I'm fine, everything's fine, and that's your reaction. So that would be more of a freeze response. Maybe or a flight response. Maybe in that moment you yell at the person because you're so angry. Maybe in that moment so notice we all have reactions. And the reason we have a reaction is we haven't taken a moment for ourselves to check in with what we're feeling and to decide, how do I want to show up right now? What would be good for me through this? So if you take a 90-second pause, it doesn't have to be a lot. I often suggest to people when you've noticed the emotion come up, if you can, try to take a moment for yourself. Maybe say you need to go to the washroom and take a few moments to just check in. What am I feeling? What do I feel like doing? Will that be helpful to me and to my relationship? Take some time to breathe, maybe go take some fresh air, use a technique or strategy, and we'll be going through some more in just a moment to help yourself so that you can decide how you want to respond, how you want to show up, what you want to say or do that you might not regret because you're making a choice on how to show up with that emotion rather than it doing it for you automatically. Physical activity, one of the best things you can do to help with anger. There is research that shows that being physically active helps with our emotions and helps with anger very much. So it can be a good release for pent-up anger. So, and there's no right or wrong way to exercise, right? Like obviously make sure that you're safe and you're not pushing yourself too hard, but you can walk, you can swim, you can dance in your living room. There's no right or wrong. Practicing gratitude can shift your perspective and help ease anger. We feel these emotions, and it's not to say, your emotions are natural, they're valid, but sometimes it's interesting, we can't feel gratitude and feel anxiety, anger, um, sadness at the same time. It's not possible. So when we tap into gratitude, and a great 3-minute exercise is just taking 1 minute and thinking of a memory that you're really grateful for. Something that happens, something that you love. It can be a memory, it can be a person, it can be a thing, something, but great if you can think of a memory. Think of a moment when you felt so grateful and give yourself 1 minute to really feel it, to see it, to re-experience it. And then do it for another moment and another moment. So you're doing 3 moments that you're grateful for, spending a minute on each, and you do that over 3 minutes. It can be a nice way to kind of ease difficult feelings. Join a caregiver support group. There's such value in talking to others that get it or peer support individually. Learn diffusion strategies. There's something called cognitive diffusion that comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. This is teaching ways to unhook from unhelpful thoughts, feelings, memories. So I'll give you a very quick example. A simple way of doing it is, you might have a difficult thought that nobody's listening, nobody's going to listen to me. You're going somewhere, you're going to say something, and you feel that, your care recipient is just going to ignore your advice. You're already amped up, feeling angry. They're not going to listen to me. So that's a thought, but your brain thinks it's a fact. So you can take a step back from that by saying things like, I notice I'm having a thought that no one's going to listen to me. Notice how that's different than no one's going to listen to me. I notice I'm having a thought that no one's going to listen to me. It's kind of like taking a flashlight and you're kind of like seeing it for what it is. This is a thought. It may happen, it may be true, but it may not be true, right? And even if it is true, it's not helping you. When you have that thought, it's amping you up. It's creating that anger response before you're even in the situation. And so, how can you take a step back? Can you say it in a silly voice? Can you sing the thought to a tune of happy birthday? Your emotions are valid. Your thoughts are valid and they're true. And you don't want to make fun of them. But when you do that, they lose some of their power. We take our thoughts less seriously. We can see them in different ways. So sometimes it's helpful to do that. Assert your needs, so important. You may be feeling angry because you feel that your needs aren't being respected. Ensure that you are voicing those needs. Ensure that you are setting boundaries and saying when you can't take something on, when you've got too much on your plate. Prioritize activities that recharge and nourish you, such as hobbies, music, reading, spending time in nature. And you'll see I put a picture here of nature and I put a child because often, let's say you're a parent, it's hard to, how do I create time for this? How can I go in nature? Bring your kids, right? Do it with them. Do what is good for you with the people in your life. Bring them with you if you can't keep them home. Um, People often tell me in caregiving, I have no time. I have no time for care for self-care. And it's very true. It's incredibly hard to have time as a caregiver. But try to prioritize the time. Try to take some time. Maybe it's 20 minutes once a week. Maybe it's 5 minutes once a day. In 5 minutes, you can listen to a song that you love. Listening to music, singing a song is can actually change your physiology and help you to reduce the intensity of an emotion. I had a client who would go to the hospital to their medical appointments. They always used to have panic attacks on the drive to the hospital. And they started listening to music and singing on the drive to the hospital. And they did this on a regular basis, and the panic attacks stopped because when we sing, it activates the vagus nerve. It's something called polyvagal theory, if you're curious about that. You'll see it later in I think in the next slide. And what it does is it helps us to activate the vagus nerve in our body. And when we can activate or stimulate the vagus nerve, it tells our body that we are safe, and it pulls us out of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. So it's very powerful. Singing does this. Gargling may sound odd, but putting water in your mouth and gargling does this. It activates the vagus nerve. It helps pull us out of that response. Intense physical activity. So start doing jumping jacks when you're feeling an emotion very intensely, or dance around your living room. Cold exposure helps with this. So I often get people to grab an ice pack, put it at the back of your neck, breathe, try to take that moment. The cold will be a shock to your body, but it also helps reduce the intensity of strong emotions. Put your hands under cold water, splash cold water on your face. Pace breathing techniques will also do this. So take good deep breaths and really ensure you're having an equal or longer out breath than an in breath. All of these will calm your nervous system. Other things, so relaxation strategies. We talked about pace breathing just a second ago. Meditation, progressive muscle relaxation, where you're tensing, for example, your feet. You tense them as tight as you can. You try to bring all the stress and tension there, and then you release. And then you do it for your legs, and you kind of work up your body. Using cognitive restructuring can help, and again, identifying those thinking traps. So CBT is very helpful, cognitive behavioral therapy. You can find something called a thought record online. If you look up CBT, thought record, Mind Over Mood is the best well-known book in this area that can help you in using cognitive restructuring or CBT to help yourself. Identify and prepare for triggers. If you know that every time you go to see a certain medical professional, you get really angry and frustrated, try to take some deep breaths before, try to journal before, try to do something that's helpful for you before you get there. Do something maybe during the appointment. So if it helps you, sometimes if we, rub our hands or we do something to kind of take care of our body and to calm our body, it can help us. And then do something after if you need to. Consider consulting a therapist or counselor to process difficult emotions, and please look into free resources first. Polyvagal theory, I mentioned already, which is everything with stimulating the vagus nerve. This is the cold exposure, the pace breathing, the singing, the gargling, all very interesting stuff if you look into this. Grounding techniques. I often encourage people, find everything in the room that's red, find everything that's orange, find everything that's yellow. When you're feeling an intense emotion, pull yourself out of it by grounding yourself back into the moment. What do I see? It can be your five senses. What's 5 things that I can see in the room? What's 4 things that I can touch with my hands? What is 3 things I can hear? And you kind of go through your 5 senses. We talked about identifying the thinking traps. Have some self-compassion. So take a moment for yourself. We have suffering that we experience that we can't control, and we have suffering that we experience that we can control. So the situation is already hard. Your emotions, you can't help what you feel, you can't help what you think, but you can help how you treat yourself through those emotions. You can be hard on yourself. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm a horrible daughter, spouse, son, whatever it may be. But notice, be kind to yourself. So there's a lot of power in self-compassion for caregivers, and I'd highly encourage looking up Mindful Self-Compassion and Kristen Neff. Lots of good resources. So I'm going to take maybe 2, 3 more minutes to wrap up some last couple of things I want to mention very briefly, and then I'll be turning the floor over to Katie, who'll mention a couple housekeeping things, and then we're going to have a question and answer period. So distraction has its place too. It is good to distract yourself, but you want to ensure you're not only distracting yourself, because the thing about our emotions is that what we resist persists. So if you kind of just push down the anger and frustration, unfortunately, it's just going to keep coming back up until you do things to help yourself feel it. The goal is you don't want to get over focused on it and find yourself, feeding into the emotion, but you don't want to ignore it either. It's the sweet spot, right? About I let myself recognize it, I name it, I feel a bit of it, and then I do something to soothe myself and help myself through it. Find ways to channel your feelings into something positive. Challenge certain beliefs and expectations you might have, and recognize when you need more support. We can channel anger in healthy ways. So address those primary emotions that haven't been processed. If you're feeling sadness, if you're feeling anxiety, if you're feeling really guilty, talk to someone about it. Get support. Advocate when your loved one, if you're not happy with the care they're getting, write a letter to the hospital, talk to someone at the hospital, make a complaint. Allow yourself to ask for help, set boundaries. There's a wonderful book called Boundary Boss that I can't recommend enough by Terry Cole. Such a good place to turn to for great information on setting boundaries. And remember, compassion without boundaries, when you're compassionate to your loved one, compassion without boundaries leads to self-betrayal. We betray ourselves, we put our needs aside, we create more anger and resentment when we don't have boundaries with others. So important. And not everybody's going to be great when you set boundaries, and that's okay. You need to keep maintaining them and doing it. So define clear limits on what you can and cannot do as a caregiver. Protect personal time. Put some self-care in your calendar. Treat it like an appointment, right? It's a non-negotiable for you. Reach out to family, friends, professional caregivers to help with the workload. Look at resources. Talk to the Ontario Caregiver Organization. They have so much to offer. Work on addressing underlying resentment and talk about this, right? Engage in forgiveness. Recognize these things. I've included here, I won't go over it, but I've included some techniques for good communication with your loved one. This can sometimes help with our feelings. Sometimes we need to, sometimes we don't know what part of anger and frustration for some people can be, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do when they say these things, when they're struggling. And so this can sometimes help. So I encourage you to take a look at that. The same with here, what do I say? What do I not say? What's helpful, not helpful? There's some stuff here as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides and we're going to go to Katie, who's got some housekeeping things, and then we'll have a period for questions and answers.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Melina, for that presentation. Our chat box is exploding with a lot of great comments and shares and suggestions and some humor, which I think is so important. We so appreciate all of your knowledge and sharing these tools and strategies with us today. So thank you so much. Before we get to our Q&A period, I am just going to take a quick moment to just acknowledge that we have talked a little bit about some hard stuff today, and we've shared a lot of hard things today in the chat box, and there are resources and supports available to everyone. You've seen some of the work that we do at OCO coming through the chat in terms of our helpline. There's also distress lines and other supports available. If you need to speak to a professional, we can get you connected to those folks. So we just want to acknowledge that we have talked a little bit about some difficult things, but what I love seeing is the support that you're all giving to each other in the chat today. At OCO, we also have programs like our coaching program, our online support groups, our one-to-one peer support. and our scale program that will be coming back in the fall, that dives deeply into this topic as well. So stay tuned to our newsletter to stay up to date on all of the great ways that OCO can support folks. So let's jump in to some questions. We had, like I said, we had a lot of comments, and I'm sure your notifications were flying as you were chatting, and I'm scrolling through here, lots of thank yous and great presentations. There was a question about that book you mentioned, though.
Yes,
Can you just remind folks? I think a lovely
of
participant
course.
threw the link into the chat, but can you just say
Yeah.
again what that book was that you recommended?
Yeah, I think I mentioned two books, Mind Over Mood, which is for cognitive behavioral therapy, and then Boundary Boss by Terry Cole, which is a great book on setting boundaries.
Great. So we will include those links, folks. You'll get links to those as well in the follow-up email for folks that are looking for it. One of the things that came forward early on in the conversation, and I think I just want to acknowledge again, is some of those sources of frustration and anger. And I don't want to leave people on a negative note. We always want to leave folks on a positive. But we had to kind of go through your communication strategies quickly. So I'm going to cheat a little and I'm going to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
now. So earlier on, people were talking about some of those challenges and sources of frustration and anger were coming from like their care recipients not participating in care. So we
Got it.
see this often in certain spaces like the mental health space where people don't want to go to this therapy and seek the
Mm.
support, or we see this with folks who have some cognitive changes over time. Do you have
Yeah.
any communication tips or strategies for caregivers who might be experiencing that type of challenge that's creating some of that frustration and anger?
Definitely. Such a great question. Thank you, Katie. So, yes, I want to start off by validating how frustrating that is and hard that is. And it's so tricky because you can never force the person you love to seek help or to get treatment. I think it's important to, first off, I think it's important to recognize the things you can control and what is your role and what's beyond, what's over functioning, right? Like sometimes maybe it's ensuring they have the information on where to go, on what resources are available. So that's a way you can help. Booking, it doesn't work. I've had the experience of people booking an appointment for someone who really doesn't want to go and they get there and it doesn't work. Like typically it's not a good kind of way. Some communication strategies that I've found helpful is sometimes it's using other words, right? There's a lot of stigma around things like therapy and counseling. And some people think, no, there's certain beliefs that people can have around it too. So I often encourage caregivers to ask their loved one to be curious and to ask them a bit more like, what's holding you back? Or what is it about the idea of going to see a counselor that's really bothering you, right? And you can figure out from there might be some faulty beliefs that your loved one that your care recipient has um, around, for example, I remember working with someone, they really had, as I asked the question, it was a family member, um, they were able to say, well, if I go to therapy it means I'm weak. Right. So sometimes we have certain beliefs. So be curious instead of going from a place of you need to do this. I'm angry. You're not doing this. Maybe try to be curious, explore, take time with them, show empathy. It really makes a huge difference when you tell your loved one, like, I get that the idea of doing that is really not something you want to do. Tell me more, right? Like, be curious rather than prescriptive with people. And I think it helps you to know you can only do what you can do of like finding the resources. You may want to frame things differently. For example, maybe they'd be more open to seeing someone who's called a coach rather than a therapist, right? Like, see where the flexibility lies and see would they be willing to maybe go for one session and see how it goes rather than committing.
Great tip. So I think reframing is really important and that curiosity is really important. And I know in my caregiving experience in these challenging situations, it's also been about timing
Yeah.
and finding the right time to have the conversations and about being okay with coming back to it because
Yeah.
you're going to hit some of that wall and that resistance. but knowing that you can, okay, we're not resonating today, it's not
Yeah.
connecting today, but maybe we're going to come back another time to revisit it. So I think those are some tips and strategies. The
Such a good
chat box
point, Katie.
continues to flow in with some suggestions. And I really love the community that's come around this conversation today. We did just have a couple comments come in around folks second guessing or questioning their own decision making and their own choices, which I could see would create a bit of frustration,
Mm,
particularly when you do feel really alone and you might
yeah,
be the only person making those decisions or making those choices. I don't know
right.
if you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've certainly worked with people who sometimes have either, made a choice that they felt that they looked back and regretted or felt like I'm not sure if that's the choice I would have made, or sometimes they feel good on that choice and they're like, that's the same choice I would make, but people don't get it, or not many people have made this choice. And so, I mean, seek out community, find people who have made that choice and that understand and that support you. Um, if it's a choice that you're regretting, self-compassion. Like, look into tools. I think I mentioned that was the other resource I mentioned. Kristen Neff has written a lot about self-compassion, and self-compassion can really help if you're dealing with guilt or regret. The truth is, um, we make the best decisions we can at the time with what we have, and some decisions we can change something now, and some decisions we can't. But know that you're human, and yeah, and just because your decision is different than what the majority or more people have done, that doesn't mean it's wrong, right? There's trying to figure out the best decision for every person.
Yeah, and we need to acknowledge that none of you got a handbook. No one walked up to you and said, "You're now a caregiver and these are all the answers." And that humanity piece is so important, right? Like we are going to make choices based on our situation, based on what we know and the information we have in front of us, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I love your suggestion about connecting. We mentioned earlier that we have online support groups and we have one-to-one peer support. And there are lots of support groups in your community hosted by different Parkinson's societies and Alzheimer's societies and different community groups.
Yeah.
And those are really great places if you are feeling really lonely to hear other people's experiences and for them to hear yours and sort of mitigate some of that isolation. So for folks that might be feeling that way, that may be a next great step to try. So we're at time, team. We have covered a lot of ground today and a lot of great resources, books, tools, and all of the content in your slides. So I just want to say thank you again, Melina, for everything that you've provided us and all of your wisdom and experience and insights. It's been a wonderful talk today, and we've heard that from our audience. And I just want to thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here and sending everyone, great thoughts, energy through what you're going through as a caregiver. And thank you for being here today. And I'm glad we could share some more information. And yeah, thank you.